Thanks so much for us. It's just such an honor and pleasure to be here. And of course, we have to acknowledge right at the beginning that none of this work with Sister Kate would have been possible without Future Church and the tremendous support from Future Church members and advocates all over. So it's just a true honor. It's also a true honor to do honor to Kate. She and I had hoped to write this book together, but as many of you know, she went home to God in October of 2019. And so to have this project brought to fulfillment is a big blessing to me. And I think a blessing I hope it will be a blessing for our church as well. The book was dedicated to the poor handmaids, Kate's community, and to all of those incredibly courageous Catholics who, against all odds, fought for their parish homes even when they thought there was no chance of it. And it's because of them and Sister Kate's creativity that we found a new pathway in canon law. So I'm going to go onto a screen share now and start my gig here. Um, and I'm hoping I'm not going to get so far in the weeds that it makes everybody nuts. But anyway, we'll do my best. We'll do our best. I want to begin by setting the context, just reminding us of what was happening that led to this work that Sister Kate and all those wonderful Catholics did. Um, it's important to know that although the 1983 Code of Canon Law acknowledges that as the people of God, we, the Catholic laity, have rights and obligations in the church, very few Catholics ever exercise those rights. And this is because in most disputes, the Vatican sides with the local bishop. And so, as we have seen over the last 20 years, the massive legal and financial fallout from failure to address clergy sex abuse and an ever worsening priest shortage led too many bishops to regard parish property as so much disposable income. And substantial numbers of bishops chose to shrink the number of parishes in their diocese to fit the number of priests and sell the churches. So just go through a few statistics if you'll bear with me. Between 2000 and the last 23 years, the bishops have closed almost 3,000 parishes. At the same time, the number of priests decreased by 25%, by 11,000. And at the same time, the number of Catholics increased by 7.9 million. So just to give you an idea of the big picture. Second, as of August 2023, a total of 32 dioceses and 3 religious orders had filed for bankruptcy protection as a direct result of lawsuits, clergy sex abuse lawsuits. And the marked increase was because of the lifting the statutes of limitations. Since the issue first came to light in the 1980s, the total settlements for Catholic clergy sex abuse had reached $3 billion by late 2023, the vast majority of this since 2002. And the total settlements are projected to reach $4 billion. So you can see the stresses that we are experiencing. As these historic changes unfold, the people of God have watched helplessly in almost all instances, except for until Kate came along, as bishops treated their beloved parish communities, their spiritual homes, as so many Starbucks franchises to be disposed of, rather than reverencing them for what they are, the body of Christ. Of course, where it all started was in 2002 when Cardinal Law was forced to resign in the wake of revelations of widespread clergy sex abuse in the Archdiocese of Boston. This led in the summer of 2004 to then Archdiocesan Administrator Richard Lennon announcing that he would close 83 parishes, leading to massive resistance with Catholics in 9 parishes choosing to occupy their churches 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, rather than allow the Archdiocese to close and sell them. These live-ins continued for 10 years, just to give you some idea how faithful these Catholics were. Despite assurances that money from the sale of their churches would not be used to pay clergy sex abuse lawsuits, a Vatican High Court later affirmed that the pending financial ruin necessitated the sale of the churches because the diocese was on the verge of bankruptcy. By 2007, the Archdiocese had paid out $615 million in clergy sex abuse settlements. So this whole situation really shone a light on the reality that even the most staunchly faithful of Catholics were completely powerless in church decision-making, even though it was their own time, talent, and treasure that had built their faith communities. But it didn't have to be that way, because we have other solutions for closing parishes rather than because of the priest shortage or other issues. And in 2003, I just want to highlight a couple things. A national study showed that 40% of parishes that merged actually lost parishioners because of the loss of the people's sense of their spiritual home, whereas parishes that were kept open with lay quote unquote parish directors or parish life coordinators were actually more likely to increase parishioners. Another thing that I won't go into too much depth in, but an exhaustive study by the Emerging Models of Pastoral Leadership Project from the National Association of Lay Ministers and others went through what are emerging structures of parish leadership. And they include, of course, the traditional model of priest, pastor-centered, but also the use of, and these are all permitted under canon law, I would say, collaborative pastoral teams, parish life coordinators, cluster parishes, mega parishes with distributed leadership groups for lay coordination. So there are a number of options that we can use besides just closing parishes. But how can one resist the closing of one's vital, vibrant, solvent parish? Well, this is where we get the story of Sister Kate Kuenstler and her religious congregation, the Poor Handmaids of Jesus Christ. Between 2006 and 2011, Kate assisted hundreds of parishioners in lodging at least 75 canonical appeals opposing the closure of their vibrant, solvent parishes. Every single recourse was denied by the diocesan bishop and later by the Vatican's Congregation for the Clergy. During this time, Kate worked underground completely because she did not want bishops going back to her religious leadership, telling them that they had to stop her. Now, they wouldn't. I spoke to a number of them and they wouldn't have done that, but Kate just figured her sisters didn't need that hassle. In any case, in early 2011, and actually it was late 2010, but we'll get to that. Thanks to Kate's canonical expertise, we found out that Catholics in the Diocese of Camden, Syracuse, Allentown, Springfield, and Buffalo began to win their appeals. These were soon followed by victories in Cleveland, New York, Indianapolis, Miami, Houston, and many others. Sister Kate Kuenstler forged a new path in canon law, catalyzing change in Vatican procedures around parish mergers and closures. No longer would Rome rubber stamp whatever any given bishop wanted, and this was huge because up until then, that's what happened. Today, Catholics are able to exercise appropriate decision-making and due process in preserving their parish and church homes. So let's see, take a little breath here. Equally important to this story is the witness of many thousands of parishioners and some good priests who bravely stood in the breach and fought for the scores of parish and church communities that remain open today because of their courageous efforts. Okay, so let's take a breath and just say, well, who is Kate Kuenstler? Well, here are some pictures of Kate in her babyhood, childhood, and teen years. She grew up in a family farm near the tiny town of southern Illinois called Wendelin, very close-knit parish community, and which is, maybe why Kate ended up spending her professional life defending the rights of small parishes. Both parents were very involved in their parish leaders. Kate's early explicit memories of God are interwoven with the beauty of her family's farm. She talks about reflecting on all the green around and the soybeans and corn. By then, I had learned the story of creation, and I knew God had created all of this. It became like a three-dimensional reality, she says, that God was real. This was part of God's plan, and I was part of it. It made me happy. Her older sister, Agnes, once told her, Kate, you wanted to be a sister from the day you were born. And after completing eighth grade at the Wendelin School taught by the Poor Handmaid Sisters, Kate moved 250 miles away to attend the community's Ancilla Domini High School, which was also an aspirancy program for young women interested in entering. Kate chose to enter the Poor Handmaids community. She says it just seemed like a good next step. I felt at home with the Poor Handmaids, and it seemed this was where God wanted me, and I was happy. After teaching for a while in second grade, Kate really came into her own as an adult educator and the creation of adult education programs in parishes in Belleville, Illinois, and in many places in that part of the country. After a financial crisis closed the diocesan education office, Kate developed a standalone adult catechist formation program that trained parish directors of religious education and parish catechists. Her model was so successful that the Springfield, Illinois diocese also adopted it. And eventually, every parishioner in the southern half of Illinois would benefit from her effective, cost-effective program. She believes her background actually prepared her for her future work with parish closings and church closings. She says that she really was struck by how the rights of the laity had been so stifled and scared off by the hierarchy. And her goal was to empower the laity to know they had a right to a voice, they had a voice, and to help them learn how to use it. Actually, unsurprisingly, in terms of God writing straight with crooked lines, her community asked her to study canon law in Rome. It was not something she particularly wanted to do at the time, but she went and was amazed when she studied Book 2 in the Code of Canon Law to discover that Vatican II had named the rights of laity in the church. And she says, I remember sitting in the classroom and thinking, do they know what they wrote? Did they really mean what I'm reading here? She says, I couldn't believe it, and I couldn't wait to come back and tell everyone. When it came time to write her dissertation, her doctoral dissertation in canon law, she had three criteria. It had to be an original topic, it had to be about religious law, it had to challenge injustice. And really an amazing turn of events, she came to find out that Cardinal Hume, none other than Cardinal Hume, was looking for someone like her to do an in-depth study about what had happened to the Carmelite sisters during the Vatican renewal process. Hume was dismayed that high-ranking churchmen, including Pope John Paul II and Vatican Secretary of State Cardinal Cesaroli, had interfered with the Vatican renewal processes of discalced Carmelite nuns. And so she wrote her dissertation on that, even though canon lawyers and others told her she would never be able to get a job if she did this, but that she would be silenced. But she did it anyway, and her expose of the unworthy tactics designed to derail the Vatican II reforms desired by so many discalced Carmelite women actually provides an important prologue to her future advocacy on behalf of beleaguered parishioners. So, how did she end up doing work on the rights of laity and parishioners? How did that get started? Well, she went to Belleville, Illinois to work in the marriage tribunal and was asked to give a talk on the rights on canon law to a really vibrant lay reform organization called the Fellowship of Southern Illinois Laity. Lena Waltering, who was a leader of the group at the time, describes what happened. And she there were about 150 people there to present, and Lena said she was incredible. She began her presentation by saying, "Canon law is your friend." As it happens, Waltering was on the board of the National Call to Action, which at the time had, I don't know, 50 or 60 regional chapters. And Waltering asked Kate if she would go on the road with her talk about the canonical rights of Catholics in the Church. And by 2009, Kate had given a total of 31 presentations in 10 states. Most venues were filled to capacity with between 1 and 300 Catholics who were amazed to discover that they had rights in the Catholic Church, and those rights were protected by canon law. Meanwhile, in July 2005, the FutureChurch board, after watching what had happened with Boston in the massive closing of parishes to pay clergy sex abuse bills, figured it was just a matter of time till many other dioceses in the United States would do the same thing, because it solved two problems for the bishops. One, they didn't have enough priests to staff their parishes, and two, they didn't have enough money to pay their clergy sex abuse bills. So in 2005, the FutureChurch board voted unanimously to start a new Save Our Parish community initiative, which was designed to provide resources to faith communities to discern appropriate responses to diocesan decisions to close, merge their vibrant, solvent, and apostolically effective parish. In other words, how do we respectfully make good trouble around this issue? At the time of Kate's national tour on the rights of Catholics, she came to Cleveland, and Bishop Richard Leonard had just been appointed the bishop there. We were preparing ourselves for the worst given what he had done in Boston. So we had 200 people come and listen to her dynamic presentation. We were looking for someone with canon law expertise to help us with the project. Kate and I drove to Buffalo the day after her presentation in Cleveland, and we pretty much bonded. And she agreed to partner with us with this effort, in which she did from 2008 to 2019. So that's sort of how Kate got into it. I want to turn now the next part of my presentation, if you'll bear with me, to doing vignettes of the parish communities that Kate worked with, that really made such a huge difference in the trajectory of leveraging greater Catholic rights around their parish homes. And one of these communities is the St. Mary Jamesville Church in the Diocese of Syracuse. St. Mary Jamesville is a very small hamlet outside of Syracuse, whose population was growing. There were 535 registered family in the parish. It was growing, not shrinking, because people were moving into the area, and they really felt that it had a thriving ministerial and faith life. It had a food bank, religious ed for everybody in town. All the kids came for their religious education program. Financially stable with assets of $526,000 and $5,400 in cash, no debt, annually met its diocesan financial obligations, and regularly exceeded its diocesan fundraising appeals. The bishop, Moynihan, wanted it to merge with Holy Cross Parish and the fairly nearby town of DeWitt, who, under its pastor, had an outstanding building loan of over $1 million, with another $500,000 in debt tied up in litigation over stained glass windows. The accruing monthly interest fees were like $6,500 a month. I highlight this because this was a key point that Kate encountered again and again in parish mergers. A financially sound parish would be suppressed, like St. Mary, merged with a parish that had significant debt, and the assets of the wealthier, like St. Mary Parish, that was now extinguished, were used to balance the books of the newly merged entity. But Thanks to Colleen Latreille, a professor at Lemoyne College and all the St. Mary faithful, they decided to push back. Colleen read about Kate's interstate tour about the rights of Catholics in the church. And even though her pastor said there's no appeal process, in fact, the diocesan paper published Kate's talk and said there is an appeal process. So this became Kate's first recourse. The St. Mary faithful filed administrative appeal with the Congregation for Clergy, even though national pundits like Father Thomas Reese, God bless him, said they are not interested in arguments like this is a wonderful parish. They're not going to get into second guessing pastoral decisions of local bishops, which was pretty much the experience of everyone at the time. Much to everyone's surprise, in December 2010, 3 years later, St. Mary was the first parishioner appeal to be granted a full hearing at the church's highest court, the Apostolic Signatura. And in May 21st, 2011, they won their unprecedented decision when the Vatican said the merger could go forward, but they got to keep their parish, their church could stay open. So just what do we learn from this? Well, a couple things. One, it's possible to win, to appeal to the church's highest court and win. Two, while it may not be possible to reverse a parish merger, it is possible to preserve a church. And that's exactly what they did. And right at the same time, between January and May 2011, to everyone's surprise, the Congregation for the Clergy issued partial victories to 13 churches in the Diocese of Allentown, Springfield, and Buffalo. And as in St. Mary's, Rome upheld the bishop's suppression of the parish, but ruled that the churches must remain open as worship sites. And of course, this will give any bishop in his right mind pause before suppressing a parish, because then he's obligated to support the church, even though there's no parish to support it. This was groundbreaking. Canon law expert at Duquesne, Nick Caffardi, called it a landmark change. Charles Wilson, the executive director of the St. Joseph Foundation, said his organization had handled roughly 300 cases related to the closing of a parish or church building, and only once had the Vatican ever ruled in favor of parishioners. So a significant change had occurred at the Vatican, but no one knew what was behind it. Well, we know what was behind it. And the fact is that just 3 months earlier, in October 2010, an earlier largely unknown victory shepherded by Kate had paved the way for both the St. Mary's win and those of the other 13 churches. And that was the people of the Friends of St. Vincent Pallotti and their charismatic pastor, Monsignor Lou Marucci, who also, by the way, happened to have contracted multiple sclerosis 8 months after his ordination and got around in a motorized wheelchair, but the most dynamic man you ever met. So the people in this parish in Camden engaged in a multi-year struggle to save their parish and church, and their victory became the linchpin upon which the succeeding successful appeals turned. Kate's creativity and her well-timed letter to Cardinal Raymond Burke, believe it or not, who was the prefect of the Apostolic Signatura, made a way through canon law where there had been none. Just a little bit of backstory about Camden. They launched a planning process called Gathering God's Gift with a goal of revitalizing parish life. But just 4 months later, Camden Bishop Galante began a massive reconfiguration of Camden parishes, which would decrease the number of parishes from 124 to 66. And as has happened in other places, what began as a planning process to make your parish more vital now became a planning process to reconfigure parishes, as in vote them off the island, rather than to plan pastoral activity. Pastoral delegates were told a decline of 50% of available priests was projected for 2015, which meant that fewer than 85 active priests would be available in 2015 to serve the diocese's 500,000 Catholics. So again, this is a key point. The change, this happened in Cleveland too, a change in planning processes midstream from revitalizing so making parishioners decide which parishes to close, even though they're vital and vibrant. Just a few words about St. Vincent Pallotti. It was a largely blue-collar parish formed in 1963 that got a total new rebirth after the dynamic Monsignor Marucci arrived. It attracted 3,000 parishioners from 34 zip codes in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Virginia, and offered 37 parish ministries through which Catholics could exercise and grow in their faith. It paid all of its bills and regularly led the diocese in support of the bishop's annual appeal. And right during this time of process, the parish dedicated a new $1 million addition to the campus, a rectory, memorial hall, and parish offices with donor naming rights attached. And that was a key thing for their victory, by the way. So, and anyway, the deanery delegates voted that through this merger, St. Vincent Pallotti would be the parish seat, and submitted that to the diocese, and they selected it as the parish seat of the merger of between three parishes, Holy Maternity and St. Aloysius. And it was the St. Vincent Pallotti campus was selected because of spacious, ample parking, new buildings, vibrant ministries, disability access, financial stability, all these great reasons about this great parish. However, just 4 months later, in April of 2008, Bishop Galante ignored the deanery recommendation and ordered Pallotti to merge with St. Aloysius, even though that parish had older buildings, scarce parking, and no handicapped access. God bless Monsignor Marucci. He immediately contacted Kate, and this dynamic duo hammered out a paradigm-shifting appeal. So what was going on with the diocese? Well, it wanted the St. Vincent Pallotti land. The Pallotti parishioners had many attorneys in the congregation, and John Wilson, who is an attorney and the president of the parish council, had been contacted by other attorneys in the parish concerned about the fact that the Diocese of Camden owned the land on which the parish sat, which is unusual. In any case, this 35-acre tract of land was valued at $27.2 million, making the potential sale of the campus far away the most valuable of all the Camden parishes slated for closure. So if the closure went through, the diocese would also be in violation of both canon law and civil laws of New Jersey, violating donor intent of the hundreds of donors who pledged over $1 million to build the new facility. Another aspect of this case that I hope I'm not getting too far into the weeds, but just so you know, some of the issues that people run into, and early on, thank God, not so much now, but Cardinal Galante was a canon lawyer who had worked in Rome. When Monsignor Marucci asked the chancellor if he could appeal this, he was told, you can appeal it because you cannot appeal it because there is no administrative act, in other words, a decree, which you have to have in order to do an appeal. Bishop Galante said he would not be issuing any formal decrees until all the mergers were completed and done, which could easily take 2 years or more. And since canon law says the canonical appeal must begin within 10 days of the formal decree, no recourse could theoretically been fired. So his plan denied parishioners their right to appeal and seek recourse in canon law in Rome. Kate and Marucci, though, God bless them, found a way to argue that the merger manual was essentially an administrative act, and they appealed to the Congregation of Clergy, who said, yes, it could be understood as an unwritten administrative act, and therefore they could appeal. So over the next 2 years, their appeal was first rejected by the Congregation of Clergy, which is like the lower court, and it was rejected because there is no appeal, no decree. And again, at the Signatura, it was rejected for the same reason, which is the Vatican's highest court. But significantly, the signatura said, "This decision is without prejudice to the possibility of your having recourse against the decision of the Bishop of Camden if this decree is issued." In other words, they could come back, and the fact that the signature is saying it is saying that they'd likely win. But in the meantime, the parishioners of St. Vincent de Paul, with all those attorneys, had filed a civil lawsuit against the diocese, and Kate wrote Cardinal Burke telling him, "You don't want to get involved in restricted gifts, canonical, advocate, juridic issues. This will not bode well in the public forum." So all of the above led to a decision by Bishop Galante on October 10th, 2010, to reverse himself and decide that the St. Vincent Pallotti Church would remain and become the seat of the new parish. And it was just shortly after that then that we get this cascade of victories in, Allentown, Pennsylvania, etc. So the upshot is somehow or other, Kate and Monsignor Mauricio got the attention of Cardinal Burke, who is traditional and conservative as he is. He's a good canon lawyer. And so I think they started to see very quickly. At one point, I know she told me, she argued that the church was in danger of losing 25% of its land in the United States if this kept going on. Okay, thank you for your patience. What did we learn? Well, from Camden St. Vincent Pallotti, we learned the Vatican will uphold the right of parishioners to obtain a decree or administrative act so they can pursue recourse. In other words, the Galante workaround failed. 2, donor intent must be respected. In other words, if you have valuable buildings in your parish campus that have been parishioners have given to, you have a stronger case. All right, now let us turn to the Cleveland Diocese. What I'm trying to do here is, I can't do everything with all of the parishes and dioceses, but I want to give the key ones that led to seminal decisions that led to the change of procedures that Kate and all these folks made happen. This is a picture of the final mass of historic St. Peter Church in Cleveland, which for me is still the most tragic thing that happened in Cleveland. There are a lot of them, but this is one of the bad ones. And in March 2012, in a landmark ruling, for the first time, a bishop was ordered to reopen 12 parishes. This is in Cleveland, the Cleveland bishop, and not only just their churches would stay open, but he was ordered to reopen their parishes. And Richard Lennon from Cleveland had followed the same canonical procedures he had used to close 83 parishes in Boston. But the Cleveland Diocese was very different from Boston, both culturally and financially. And for one thing, the Cleveland Diocese was not at all on the ropes. The diocese had increased revenue to $265 million in 2006. The chief financial officer said the finances of the diocese and most parishes were not in crisis. The previous bishop, Bishop Pilla, valued personal parishes and valued the faith communities in low-income neighborhoods and did everything he possibly could to keep them open. His philosophy was keep them going in the urban regions for as long as possible. He prioritized mission over money. He is known, Len Calabrese, who worked for the diocese, was known to say, Pilla would say, "Why would you want to close parishes? They're the presence of a church in a community, and they're serving people in all kinds of ways." So he chose creative strategies to keep parishes together. There were 13 parish life coordinators. We had pastoral teams. We had lay empowerment and church decision-making. In launching the Vibrant Parish Life process, Bishop Pilla said, "It must involve initiatives at the local level and be embraced willingly with the heart by the most effective. This demands local leadership." Well, then comes Bishop Lennon from Boston, who was reeling. He viewed parishes as corporations, not communities of faith. I quote from Pastor Bob Begin. He evidently read a book on franchise management and makes his decisions as if parishes are franchises. If there's enough room in one church for all to worship, why have more than one? A particular mission, ethnicity, none of those things meant anything. He did not value creative strategies to keep parishes open and got rid of both the pastoral teams and the parish life administrators. And once again, we also had a derailed pastoral planning process, the Vibrant Parish Life, and I think I've covered that. I probably don't need to do that. So the upshot is that Bishop Lennon closed 52 parish communities, which is a big shock because he did not again abide by recommendations from at least 9 of the clusters that about which parish should close or not. All 52 parishes were either in the inner city or in the inner ring suburbs of Cleveland, Akron, and Lorain. So these letters on March 14th, 2009 were met with outrage and dismay, and things only went downhill from there. It was a very contentious process. Rocco Palmo, a pundit, said it was the most ferocious and bitter parish planning standoff a stateside church has seen in the last quarter century. And this is how bad it got. Bishop Lennon insisted on going to the closing masses of all the parishes that were being closed. He had to wear a bulletproof vest, believe it or not, and there was always a police presence. That's how, and really, the city is not quite, that's how high the feelings were. Just a couple things about the Black community: St. Cecilia, Epiphany, St. Adelbert, all closed. These left 19 square miles in the city without any Catholic presence in predominantly Black Cleveland neighborhoods, stretching from Shaker Heights to downtown Cleveland. Pastor Dan Begin said, for many Black families, the churches, their whole life, now there's nothing convenient. And many of these parishes, as we will see, provided very important ministries in low-income neighborhoods. And will say, by the way, Cleveland regularly competes with Detroit for being the poorest city in the country. So just to give you some idea of how heartbreaking this was for our city. Personal parishes were also closed, and I want to talk now briefly about historic St. Peter, which is the church you see on your slide. It was known as an excellent Catholic parish nationally and internationally. A Lilly Endowment study described it as among the excellent Catholic parishes. It was also acclaimed in Worship Magazine by Reverend Paul Philibert for liturgical excellence. This parish had 700 parishioners who hailed from 5 of the 8 counties comprising the Cleveland Diocese, who regularly traveled to the inner city to worship. It supported the Marion Sterling Public School, located in one of the poorest neighborhoods. St. Peter volunteers provided reading programs, day-long tutoring, assistance with proficiency tests, helping kids get into private high schools, grant writing. This very summer that Bishop Lennon closed St. Peter, the congregation had raised $250,000 to have a playground and learning garden built at the school. It was financially robust. The community had already completed a $2 million restoration of the church funded by grants and parishioner donations. It's the longest continuously occupied church in the diocese. And in 2008, this was the worst of all, the bishop refused a parishioner's offer of an additional $2 million earmarked to pay some $304,000 of backdoor diocesan assessments, which had been placed on hold by Bishop Pilla. But he downright refused this gift, and $1 million of it was designated for St. Peter's Outreach Ministries. So he had a predetermined decision to close it, and there's evidence that he wanted to sell it to Cleveland State University. Anyway, I guess I shouldn't dwell on that, but it still breaks my heart. 15 parishes appealed in Cleveland. I should say that FutureChurch had done a lot of advanced organizing, and in the spring of 2009, Kate's expertise guided the initial canonical recourse lodged by Catholics in over 20 Cleveland parishes. And that same expertise from Kate helped pastors, pastoral ministers, Cleveland's Presbyteral Council, and countless laity understand and claim their canonical rights. 3 years later, of those 13 remaining appeals, every single one of them was upheld by Rome, meaning that the bishop had to reopen and the parishes and the closed churches. And as you can see, there was universal rejoicing from parishes all over the world. Father John Beale commented at the time, he's a canon lawyer at Catholic U, that Bishop Lennon had badly botched the procedure. So let's just cut to the chase. I'm sorry, what did we learn from Cleveland? Well, we learned that coordinated diocesan-wide pushback can be effective. We learned it's possible to keep both your parish and your church intact because the Vatican upheld both appeals. And we got this incredible commentary, canonical commentary from Sister Kate, which I'm going to go into in some depth now. This was published in March 29th, 2012. This is the first time she went public. So for the first time she was quoted in the paper and everything. I guess she figured it was safe now. And it was the first public explanation of Rome's rapidly changing rules related to parish mergers and church closings. And just to say, when Kate started all this in 2006, nobody had a clue how this was going to go on, because all the instructions and canons about mergers and closures were not in one place in canon law. They were all over. So everyone was feeling their way at the beginning. But this was the first public explanation of where Rome was finally getting some procedures in place. And she noted that both the Congregation for Clergy and the Apostolic Signatura make a clear distinction between the legitimate reasons to merge parishes and legitimate reasons to close a church. And she clarified a shortage of priests, diocesan financial challenges, and demographic issues are not enough to close a church. There are insufficient reasons. Now, mind you, these are exactly what every bishop had been saying to all these parishes and dioceses, since from forever. Okay. And then, just to say, so she sort of got what was happening and put it out publicly. And by the way, that was later on downloaded, but I'll get to that. The official procedures now that finally came a year later, issued by clergy and in April 2013 and again on July 2020, identify distinct canonical processes for modifying a parish, closing a church, or selling or alienating a church property. These procedures also said a lack of clergy, demographic decline, or grave financial state do not constitute grave cause to deconsecrate and sell a church, and also said, this was amazing in 2020, because the 2013 criteria only applied to churches, but in 2020, the Vatican instructions said these three criteria could also apply in parish mergers and modifications. And this has already been shown because there are 3 smaller parishes in St. Louis that just over the past 18 months won their appeals and did not have to be merged. Just to unpack this a bit more, the bishop must consult the Presbyteral Council. He must issue 2 separate decrees, one for a parish and one for a church. Each decree must, at least in summary fashion, list a just cause for modifying a parish and a grave cause for closing a church. The deal is, in most dioceses, certainly in Cleveland, and also actually in the Archdiocese of New York, the diocese would write all these decrees for these 40 parishes or whatever they were going to close in church and And it would be a boilerplate. It would be the one size fits all. This is what you all said, you know. It did not get into any of the specifics about this parish, this church, what's happening here, what's happening there. So this is a very important ruling because there could be no more cookie cutter decrees. You have to really think about this, you know. So needless to say, this was a great victory. And in 2012, Kate received the Trivison Award, named for our co-founder, the Reverend Louis J. Trivison, who he and I founded the organization in 1990. I like to call this bringing in the harvest. So, and here's what she had to say. With this recognition, you also recognize the laity in the church today who use their voice, which was affirmed 50 years ago at the Second Vatican Council and envisioned later in the Code of Canon Law in Canon 212. And she quoted it that night, it's worth quoting now because we have to stand in this as laity in the church. And that is that the Christian faithful have the right and even at times the duty to manifest to the sacred pastors their opinion on matters which pertain to the good of the church. And as you can see, Kate's whole thing was about empowering the laity. So now that she did the commentary, and of course, FutureChurch put it all over the place on the internet, Kate was swamped with new clients. And this is my favorite part. Her commentary began to significantly impact diocesan policy elsewhere, which led to successful appeals from parishes in the Diocese of Kansas City, Grand Rapids, Miami, Indianapolis, and Houston, Texas. And so, likewise, the canonical documents that Cleveland had prepared for Cleveland, we called it the Canonical Appeals for Dummies at the time, but now it's Canonical Recourse Process, and her commentary were downloaded by hundreds of parishioners throughout the US and internationally in England, Ireland, Australia, and Canada. And they are still being downloaded today. I just was in touch with someone yesterday. I will talk briefly now about the Archdiocese of New York, which was the next sort of diocesan-wide pushback that we got involved with. I say we, FutureChurch and Kate. And in here, Cardinal Dolan tried, just like Bishop Galante had, to withhold decrees from parishioners. He only published them on the website after Kate went to Congregation for Clergy and clergy made him. Cardinal Dolan also wrote cookie cutter decrees with boilerplate language. So here's what cut to the chase, though. Of the original 42 archdiocesan churches he had planned to close, Kate's canonical expertise and the courage of New York Catholics actually preserved 11 of them for regular worship. So again, this is something. She wrote an email after the success in the Archdiocese of New York telling me, I believe this is a seminal time in the U.S. Church. I am hopeful we can stop the floodgates that are decimating the faith life of the laity. She says, I argued the cases in a new way. I have influenced the development of jurisprudence for the first time. Someday, this new jurisprudence may very well become part of the next revision of canon law. But for the first time since 2005, I've had validation from Rome, and it feels good. So, man, if anybody ever deserved it. Okay, this is a boilerplate tabulation. I hope your eyes don't glaze over, but we, FutureChurch, kept tabulation of parish mergers and closing appeals. Now, there are probably many others that we don't know about, you know, but this is what we do know about. And of the, between 2005 and 2018, there were 38 parishes these are all in the US, who appealed to the diocese first, which is what you always want to do in a parish closing or merging. You go to the diocese first. 35 of those were actually won at the diocese. Of those, Kate won 17 of them. The others were pretty much won in Boston when Cardinal O'Malley folded, exceeded and reversed the decision to merge or close. In Rome, there were a total of 100 that we've tracked, four of which were international. 46 of these were won in Rome, and Kate won 30 of the 46 for 65% of the successful Rome appeals for a total of 47. So in some ways, the numbers aren't as important as the story of how to change the trajectory of what happened. I did and I think I'm just going to tell you this now. I did a study of what's happening now, and there are widespread diocesan appeals or parish and church closings underway in St. Louis, Chicago, Cincinnati, Joliet, and Columbus. And I wanted to see, did any of the stuff that Kate fought for about the rights of laity, did that work? And for example, are laity educated about canon law and their rights? And yes, in Cincinnati and St. Louis, it's explicit on the website, somewhat in Chicago and Joliet, not in Columbus. Is the decree readily available to anyone seeking recourse? And yes, it's readily visible on the website in Chicago and St. Louis. It's available, but the website search function is required in Cincinnati and Joliet. It's available, but difficult access in Columbus. Does each decree, is it individualized for each, for identifying just cause and grave cause? Yes, Chicago, Cincinnati, and St. Louis. In part, Joliet, no, Columbus. So we can see in all of these, 4 of the 5 dioceses are now allowing laity to have their just due process. So, and do they explicitly name a parishioner's right to seek recourse within the time frame? Yes, St. Louis, yes, Chicago, Cincinnati, and Joliet. So this was a big one for me because canon law says anytime anybody appeals, the church or parish should remain open, but no one ever did it until Archbishop Rosansky in St. Louis. And he had 7 parishes remain open until the appeal ran its course. So that was a big thing. I'm hoping they'll do that more. So now I want to we're coming now to the conclusion. If your eyes are glazing over, we're almost done. I want to talk a little bit about, so what was happening in Kate's soul while all this is going on. Well, she spent a lot of time consoling the hundreds of people when their canonical recourses were denied. She says when she got the negative decision for the Vatican, she is then on the phone with these Catholics for hours. And she says, I would spend 2 or 3 hours crying together with them what happened, mourning the fact that it's over, going through this pain. She says, I don't let them hang up until we come to some form of peace. They can't accept it and they shouldn't, but just a peacefulness, a calmness comes. The original agony is over. And this led her to realize that this is what the bishop should be doing. I am taking the place of the bishop. Not that I claim that. I just wonder why these men are bishops if they cannot walk with the pain that they themselves have created for the people. And eventually she found great meaning in this. I find that as important as it is to do what I do as a canon lawyer, as a Christian, as a woman of faith, this walking with the people and their pain is the most important thing I do. Now, the deal is, this, of course, had consequences in her heart and soul. And I really had no notion of this closely guarded personal struggle she endured because of fidelity to her mission until actually I did the interviews before she was dying. And she said, I actually spent 7 years in a dark night of the soul. But she continued her canonical work even though she had no effective energy for it. The only thing that helped her was her love for her foundress, Mother Katharina Kasper, and who, like Kate, grew up in this teeny tiny poor town, and Kate had a great devotion to Mother Catherine Kasper. And she says she realizes that she needed to set aside her ego because this is what was important were the people from the parishes who were doing this for the right reasons, said Kate. I realized I had to start following what my founder said about not following my ego and always asking, is this the will of God? And that's where I redirected a lot of my energy. I had to stay faithful for the mission and what the people's needs were. And she says that was a real learning experience for me. So I just thought it was really fascinating that despite in the midst of being this dark night of her soul, Kate renews her vows at the Church of the Annunciation in Israel in 2016. And so I just love this picture. Her death in October 2019 left many Catholic activists feeling bereft, yet she herself was at peace. She did not fear death, although she fought hard to live. She said, perhaps my role was to begin this work on behalf of the laity, and expressing the conviction that it was now far enough along for others to follow. And I forgot to mention about those 5 dioceses where, all the widespread parish closings are happening. There are organized groups in every single one of those dioceses defending the rights of parishes in the church with canon lawyers who are helping them, primarily from the St. Joseph Foundation and Robert Flummerfelt, 2 groups that we referred to after Kate passed. So just to conclude, Kate Kuenstler's unwavering love for parish communities and Catholic laity paved the way for Catholics to, for the first time, exercise leverage in church decisions that affected them directly. Her passion for empowering the laity helped prepare the way for synodality to become a Catholic reality, I think, during these years of the Synod on Synodality. Because of her faith in the people of God, the arc of Catholic history may at last be bending toward justice. Amen. And I'm going to cry now. So, anyway, I'd love to hear whatever questions, concerns.
Yeah,
I would
thank you.
say there aren't any dumb questions. There's only dumb answers, and I'm in charge of those. Okay.
And those of us who present are usually good at giving them.
Yeah. Anyway,
Thank you so much, Chris, for that
yeah.
really wonderful presentation and the story of Sister Kate. I met Kate, I think twice, maybe at different call to action things, and I knew she was a force to be reckoned with. And
Yeah.
your presentation certainly like draws that out. But in your final comments about her and sitting on the phone with these parishioners until they came to some sense of peace,
Yeah.
really hit home to me that she was also a minister. She
Yeah.
wasn't just a lawyer. She wasn't,
No.
a revolutionary in so many ways. She was also a minister. So thank you for sharing that story. I don't think
Yeah.
I have ever heard that.
Yeah. Well, that's the
Oh,
gift of doing this. You get the inside scoop, so it's an
yeah.
honor to share it.
Yeah. Let's see. Let me get me off screen here. And I will give you all the ability to unmute yourself. If you'd like it to ask a question, I would just ask that you use the raise hand feature. And that you'll find in your React button. It looks like a little heart that says React under it. And then you'll be able, if you click on that, you'll be able to raise your hand. And that way I'll know which order to call on folks. Okay, so I see Deborah Davis. Let me bring you up on screen with Chris. And just go ahead and unmute yourself, Deborah, and ask your question or make your comment.
Thank you. So my question is this: how has that work continued? The work that you and Kate and so many others promoted several years ago. How is that continuing now in terms of encouraging parishes who are facing some of the same realities?
Yes. Thank you for the question. For one thing, the Future Church website still has a Save Our Parish community. People download it. I get it in my email. I respond with all the information and where to get information and refer them to canon lawyers. The other thing that was very encouraging to me when I did the review of those 5 dioceses is that in every single one, there is a grassroots group that is organized to and banded together to protect their parish homes. And in St. Louis, anyway, even before it started, they thought that they were going to lose, the Archbishop was going to close 80 to 100 parishes was the original plan. People pushed back and the plan went to 43. And out of those 43, at least 3 they've won their mergers. Buffalo, I know that they weren't among the ones I studied, but there are people whose appeals have been accepted in Rome. So there's still the work that Kate began. She showed the way, and the St. Joseph Foundation has been doing this for years. So they have done a lot of work as well as Robert Plummervelt. So it's happened. Thank you. Maureen, I guess you're next. You need to unmute. Oh,
Yeah,
I'm sorry. Oh, yeah, there we go.
I'm an associate of the Sisters of St. Joseph here in New Orleans. So,
Yay!
and I wish I would have known of this work and everything, but we muddled through a very similar situation. Exactly what you said. We were the parish that we had no debt, we were solvent. They started with a process. Let's look at the church, the parishes. Let's all give it, lots of feedback, lots of paperwork, and I was actually not part of this, but they merged 3 parishes, and each parish had their own committee. They all met. They met twice, and at the 3rd meeting, they had to vote. And the Archbishop had a deacon leading it, and we were told they were going to rely upon the decision of the group. And they didn't.
Right, exactly.
They just overruled, and that is what incensed everyone.
Right.
Because I think
it's such a betrayal.
People were like, okay, we understand the merger, our numbers are down, okay, but the fact that we felt like we were led, like hoodwinked, and really insulted. I mean, people.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, we got together, about 12 of us, and we hired a canon lawyer. And I only knew about this because I had seen an article about St. Louis.
Oh, good.
And I called, it took me a while. I found the St. Louis parish. I called them. I talked to the pastor. It was quite a investigation. So we have appealed, but we took recourse in December of 2024. So but we also had that problem where we could not find a decree.
Oh, see.
And that's so sneaky. That is so sneaky.
And that's the plan. I hate to say it, but that's why we had to do this work, And that was one of Kate's big things. The parishioners do this very conscientious evaluation of their parish. It's a faith community. It's fruitful. It does this and does that. In the meantime, the diocese is just looking at it as a corporation. And she saw that again and again. A failure of faith, I think, a failure of respect. Anyway.
So we shall see. I mean, it's early on. It's just 3 months.
Well, keep me in the loop, okay? Email me and let me know what goes on, because I like to track this still somewhat.
Sure. And I really appreciate you talking about this. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Maureen, and good luck. Yeah, do keep us in the loop.
I think I saw Sharon Harrington on here from Boston. Sharon, are you still here? Because she's an attorney and did incredible stuff in Boston. Anyway, I don't know. She might have had to go.
Yeah.
So shouldn't do that. Embarrass people.
We'll give her a second. There was one question in the chat.
Okay.
And I don't know if it was pertaining specifically to the Cleveland diocese when you were talking about that, because that's when it came up, or more in general. But Joan asks, were parish schools also closed in most of the church closings? Do you know what that process?
The parish schools is a whole different thing, and they don't really have any protections under canon law the way the parishes do. So that usually needs to be worked out directly with the bishop. People have tried to appeal parish schools, and they don't have the protections. They just don't. Rome will defer to the local authority, almost always on that.
Thanks for that, Chris. Good question. All right, are there any other questions or comments anyone would like to make? If not, we will
Is it
wrap
okay
things
if
up
I
here.
speak up?
Oh, sure, go ahead.
Boston, but
Oh,
nothing
hi, Claire.
official at all. And I wanted to thank you for a terrific presentation, very inspirational. And it just says to all of us that if you have to pay attention and you have to not be afraid to speak
Yeah.
up. And Chris, you're following in the steps and in the tradition of Sister Kate. And, you know, Hitler would never have been able to do what he did if people paid attention and
Yeah.
spoke up. And any megalomaniacal person, even if it's a bishop, needs to be countered. And so I thank you, Chris, for a wonderful presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. That's my classmate from Georgetown, 1968. Mwah!
Well,
Great, thanks,
think-
Claire. And
Sure.
then let's see, we've got Leslie's got her hand up. So
Okay, great. Thank you.
Leslie,
Thanks,
if you want,
Russ.
go ahead. Yeah.
Thanks, Russ. So I posted a question and I realized I was probably inadequate in what I typed, but I wonder if that actually Kate, through her work, became a bishop by when as she was ordained. My question is if bishops are actually ordained by the Holy Spirit in listening and sharing tears with the faithful, as Kate did.
I think
So that
certainly,
our spiritual, so I look at
Yeah.
bishops is, you know, the status that we put on it, but if in some spiritual sense that those are that women and men who do this work of
Certainly.
mourning with others are
yes,
ordained by the Spirit.
I think she felt that this is what the bishop should be doing. I don't think she herself would have ever identified as a bishop, nor do I think she would have wanted to. I think it would have been very difficult for her to do the work that she did if you're so enmeshed in the clerical system you're trying to reform. And this is one of the gifts of religious life, I think, that we do have a freedom to be prophetic. And so it's really hard to speak truth to power if you're the power. You know? So I'm not going to say it's impossible because there have been some prophetic bishops, but I'm not sure Kate would have, well, I'm pretty much positive she would never have wanted the job ever.
Thank you.
But her spiritual power is, you know, certainly magnificent.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Leslie. And let's see, we've got Sister Rosie, and then I think that'll be our last question or comment. So let me bring you up on screen here, Sister Rosie.
Christine, I just want to thank you for remembering all that hard work of our sister.
Yeah.
When she would come home and share some of the struggles she was going through at the time, and to know what a passion she had for justice within the church. And we appreciate you for carrying on that and letting people know that there is a way that they can find themselves and to trust sometimes in the process of faith, when sometimes you can see no way there.
Yeah.
And just thank you for all of that.
Thank you, Sister Rosie. Well, I was determined, this is my theme in my senior years. We're not going to have any forgotten women if I can help about it, you know? And she is someone no one would have ever heard about because she worked underground for such a long time. So I loved her dearly, and I admired her because she walked her talk. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Sister Josie. And thank you, Chris, so much for all the work that you have done, the work that you are doing. And I'm keeping my lips tight because I know you've got some really exciting projects that you're working on, and time will tell what those are. So, but thank you so much, Chris, for being here tonight and for all that you do.
Thank you, Russ, for Future Church. We're thriving. 35 years. It's our 35th anniversary.
35 years this year.
It wouldn't
Yeah,
have
we
happened
entered
without
into our
Future
35
Church. It
years.
would not. I mean,
Yeah.
even with Kate, we were great partners, but
Yeah. And
so
so many wonderful people who support Future
Yeah.
Church. So thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you to all of you for joining us this evening. And I wish you a very lovely evening and a good rest of the week and a beautiful weekend.